Welcome! In this video, Paul, N3RQV, discusses why it's important to support public service events and how you can help.
Presentation, if anybody has a question, ask at any time, interrupt me at any time. So this is our web page with this year's events on it. You've probably seen it. If not, go to the MARC web page and you can take a look. So first of all, what is amateur radio public service? That's the ARRL definition. And what I'm going to talk about is the community events. I think disaster response may be something more suited to the trailer. So what do we provide in most of the events? Most of the events we're looking at are walks, runs, bikes, a couple parades. We provide situational awareness, let the race director know primarily where the front runners are, if there are any problems on the course, where the tail runners are. And we provide safety of participants, the public, and of course ourselves. Injured runners, missing marshals, missing course workers, cars on closed courses, those are all things we've run into just in the last couple of years that I remember. How do we do it? We provide tactical directed radio nets, tactical calls. When you're calling in the tactical net, you call in with your tactical ID. And when you're done with the conversation, you call out with your FCC ID. You don't need to repeat all of them every time. Calling in with tactical tells me a couple things, primarily where you are. Plain English is what we use. You know, most of these are FM repeaters, very good coverage. Typically you can hear people what they're saying. We don't use any particular codes or anything else, just plain English. Articulate so we can hear what you're doing. And we go by the 4 W's, the who, where, what. And that's who are you calling, who are you, where are you, and what do you want? On a tactical net, a lot of times your tactical ID will tell me where you are, but not always. You could be with somebody who's moving around, somebody who's in several places during the event. So a typical call-in might be net control. This is water stop 1 with a runner sighting information. So you'd be told, go ahead, water stop 1. You'd come back with whatever it was, you know, male runner 1, 2, 3, just past water stop 1. And net control, if I'm net control, I'm going to repeat that. Understand, male runner 1, 2, 3, just past water stop 1. Several reasons. I'm getting old and I forget stuff, so I repeat it. Another one is to make sure the way I heard it is the way you said it, and also so the race director can hear what it was. Sometimes the race director is in a very noisy environment at the finish line. They can't always hear all the calls. So I tend to repeat everything you call in so the race director can hear it, so you can verify it. And then when I clear with my FCC call, N3RQV out, and you can clear with your FCC call.
Question.
Yes?
So the race director is not necessarily a ham.
We have two things. We have a shadow of the race director, which, you know, is our creative language we call the race director.
Okay.
But that's our person who's shadowing the race director. So, same thing we have, you'll see some of these, we have police. You know, we don't have a ham police guy, we have somebody with the police. And medical, same thing. No personally identifiable information of the people we're covering. Use bib numbers typically is what you'll see. So if somebody's injured, you don't want to see, hey, George is sitting here and he got hurt. It's bib number so-and-so. got hurt where it is. Equipment, what do we use? Typically, these are through FM repeaters. Most people start with a radio, add a quarter wave antenna, makes it long enough so it's easy to stick in your face. Either a headset or a speaker mic. A lot of these events, for some reason I haven't figured out, they like to play very loud music, particularly at finish lines. So if you're with the race director at the finish line, you're going to be hard pressed to hear what's going on. And typically you're not going to hear it holding up an HT. You may not hear it with a speaker mic down on your chest. So you really need to be able to listen. Spare battery. I've got a spare battery for all my radios. I've never run out of battery power. I'm sure as long as I carry a spare, I never will. But I have heard people in events who had to stop to replace batteries. So a spare battery's always a good idea. The MARC safety vent, as you're standing out there, so other people might see what's going on and get interested and start asking about amateur radio. The other second reason is to get your HT off your belt. One HT on your body and have your back to the antenna you're trying to talk to. You know, that can cut down 15 dB, which basically turns your 5-watt HT into about a half a watt HT. So if you get it up, the vests have radio pockets, they have mic tabs. If you get it up there, you can get the antenna up in the air. You're a lot less likely to attenuate your signal and drop out. And the third reason, since a lot of these are road races, you're standing in the road somewhere, and it might even help you not get run over. So, dress appropriate to the weather. Last year, as you'll see, we had a lot of rainy events. This year, I've been guaranteed that the weather will be perfect for every event. And this is the basic. This is what we're trying to move toward. I've been told I don't have the funding to do this year, so maybe next year.
Is that the mobile repeater?
Yeah, that's the mobile command center repeater,
Mobile
crossband, you name it, we got it. I got asked what I have. This is my car/net control, sometimes net control. Took a drill, drilled a hole in the roof, stuck an antenna on it. Got a dual band, dual channel radio. It'll do crossband. All the dual bands I have will do crossband. It'll also do fusion, do APRS. We typically don't use a lot of APRS. There are a couple events we might want to look at to do that. But most of our events we're standing still, so we don't really need it. I run it off a battery in the back seat. It's a sealed AGM battery, so it's not venting. I'm not going to blow myself up, I hope. And these are just pictures of the tangled mess between my front seats that power the whole thing.
What radio is that? Just out of curiosity.
That's a Yaesu FT400, I think is what it is.
That's the one.
So it's, the control head's separate from the...
Yeah, this is a control head. That's the body of it down there. And this is a little stand that the control head sits on.
And just out of curiosity, is the microphone running back to the base, or is the microphone attached to the control head?
It comes back to the base,
Okay.
which, you know, there's an extension to put this base back in the back of the car, which I didn't put in. The antenna comes down in the back of the car, and just the antenna cable runs up to the front, and everything else is in the front. So that's the basics of what we're doing, how we're doing it, what we're doing it with. What the events are, first event we've got coming up in 10 days is the MS Walk. Multiple sclerosis has fundraisers. They're a nonprofit organization. They run this, and if you look at their website, they run literally hundreds of these all over the country. So we support that. We've been supporting it for a number of years. This one takes place, it's a walk, takes place in Rockville. Starts in the Rockville Town Center down here, runs right down this road and around a 3-mile course. One water stop. There's a 1-mile circuit that goes back just around this loop. This is last year's map. I haven't finished this year's update yet, but I tend to be kind of visual, so I tend to send out maps for these things and a roster list so you can see where you are and what's going on. Usually whoever covers this turnaround point, also when they go back, will pick up all the signs. They not only have the maps, but they go hammer little signs in the road along the way, so they pick them up and bring them back. Pikes Peak. Pikes Peak is sponsored by the Montgomery County Road Runners Club. It's a large running club in the county, a nonprofit. They sponsor a lot of the big events. This is their first big one of the year, and it's Pikes Peak because it's run down Rockville Pike, and it gives the participants a peek at the season that's coming up. So that's where the name came from. This is April 28th, the day before. This again is last year's course. This I think is a picture Alex took. This is one of the clocks that a lot of times they'll put out at the mile markers. What we do is we give the time hack, the start hack, to the people there so they can start it. Some of the events, they want the radio people to start it. If you have to do that, it's incredibly difficult. There's an on-off switch on the top. When I say go, you push the on switch, it starts. So that's your training for running a clock. Again, this is, I usually take what's there and put marks on it. One of the things Alex wanted me to talk about is some of the challenges we face. Right here, the finish down here used to be at White Flint, which isn't there anymore, so they moved it back. They moved it back again. So every time they did that, they had to move the start back. So right now, the finish is at Pike and Rose. What's the start look like and why is it a problem? That's the Metro subway station, parking lots on either side. The start used to be up here and run down to Rockville Pike. It's been moved back progressively, so it's down here. Now if you look here, you'll see there's a pond. Ponds tend to be at the bottom of hills. So this is a hill. It's good for the running club because they used to have staggered starts where the fast people would start and then 10 minutes later the slower people would start to spread out the crowd on the street. This is a big hill. They don't have staggered starts anymore. The hill staggers people just fine. The problem is, from here to here, the elevation is 50 feet. So this is in a dip down here. Plus there are apartments here, buildings here, and it's hard to get a good reliable signal out of there. Last year I had parked right there in front of this big empty field, which is now a 6-story apartment building under construction. So what I'm going to wind up doing is parking up here and probably use a crossband repeat and stand down here somewhere to catch the start. Generally, if the race director is here, we can get the start from the race director. The problem with a lot of race directors is they're not sure where they're going to be. So we have another meeting on this event Monday night, and I hope to get out of the race director where she wants to meet. So if it's here, then we can use the race director to get a start signal if it comes out of there. So on a lot of the longer events, the running clubs will say there's a 15-minute cutoff, because most of these being road races, they close roads and they want to reopen them. So they'll say, you know, you get 15 minutes per mile and then we're opening the road. I've never seen any race where they actually enforce that. So, but you can figure about 15 minutes a mile. The lead runners, you can figure about 5 minutes a mile. The tail runners, supposed to be 15. Most events, they wait around a lot longer than that. So, yeah, and the other thing that I've never gotten a good answer on is they always have 5K, 8K, 10K, and they put clocks out at mile markers. And we put all our people at mile markers. So I haven't quite figured that out, but Bethesda Chevy Chase Rescue Squad is the week after that, May 5th at 8 o'clock. This is last year's course. Starts down at the fire station, takes a big loop, and runs down into Bethesda. Apparently the loop down into Bethesda upset a lot of people, so they had to change the course. The next couple slides I actually got from the race director on the new course. And you can read the things about, you know, it's a fundraiser for them. They also have a 2-mile family walk. The tentative course, they have to run through an approval process. The local police department, the county, 2 different groups in the county, and they have to get that done before the USATF, which stands for something having to do with running, will come out and certify the course as a certified course. A lot of the runners who run these things only run certified courses. They keep track of them. They have to qualify so many to get into marathons, so it makes a difference to the runners. So they haven't done that yet, so it's not an official course yet, but starts the same place and runs the same up to here. It used to run over here and down, and to make up for this loss, they've got this tortured path through the suburbs of Bethesda. They eliminated one water stop, which is over here, so there's one water stop. It used to be at the other side of this park, the first water stop. The second one's just gone. So we're waiting for the final configuration. If this is it, then I'll do the assignments based on this. But we could use more people for this. And the other, again, this is what the race director sent me. You know, MARC has been assisting in this for a number of years. They're looking for, because they have so many intersections now they have to cover, they're looking for more course marshals, and where we can have a radio operator do the course marshaling at the same time. They would appreciate it, because they've got a list of about 30 people they've got to come up with. Course marshaling, I didn't write that. That's, you know, really fun job. It's not something I'd say, but it's interesting because this is what they hand out to the course marshals down here. And you can see, call for help. It says, if you're not with somebody with a radio, call 911. So what are you supposed to do as a radio operator? You're the guy these people talk to when something happens to call for help. So, then the rest of it is just, you know, tell the neighbors not to run over the runners and tell the runners which way to go. That's course marshaling. Okay, so far, we've talked about events where you're standing still. The Takoma Park 4th of July parade is one where you're actually marching in the parade. It runs through downtown Takoma Park. It's one that Tom coordinates, and sets up and runs. And I don't know if you want to talk about it or you just want me to go through it.
Go ahead.
Okay. There are, in the parade, 6 or 7 groups. Each group has a head of that group. The radio operators are assigned to the head of the group. You coordinate with the head of that group. Last year it was the Maven van set up here with, I think, Tom, and I'm not sure who else was in it. This is July 4th, so of course it was very hot outside. We're all marching along here, and Tom was sitting in the air-conditioned Maven van. So, smart man. So, and you actually march, and there's one of the radio operators is with the announcer at the reviewing stand at the end of the race. And the idea, aside from identifying problems, is to tell that person through net control of any of the scheduled floats, groups, parades that aren't going to make it. So what's this look like? They have dancing girls, Boy Scouts, Uncle Sam, fire engines, precision lawnmower marching team, and, you know, a good time had by all. Okay, so suppose you don't want to march in a race or in a parade. This is one we don't march in, and no, you don't get to ride on the fire engine. This is one we help Damascus Emergency Communications Team decked with. We help basically where the race starts. They set up Damascus High School, has big parking lots on both sides, and they have to line everybody up and coordinate the whole group going out. So we assist with that. The parade itself runs from the high school up to our field day site. So this is also unusual because it's on a Friday evening. It starts 4 or 5 o'clock, something like that. Mid-July, you know, after the 4th of July parade. And at the end of it, they have fireworks at the field day site. I think the rest of the weekend they also have Damascus days, so there's a lot of other things going on in Damascus. Okay, the other events, Rockville Rotary Twilight Runfest. This is another evening event, as the name implies. And this picture just kind of perfectly summarized the event last year. It rained like cyclones. And I thought for sure they were going to call the event off, but they didn't. So, the event, Rockville Center's down here. The event takes a loop around this way. Some of the things we run into, like Ron came down from DECT to help. He was at water stop 3, I think it is, on the school grounds. And when he got there, he reported that there were no course workers. So we reported it back to the course organizers, who said, they're coming, we got it covered. Well, after about the first lap, he reported back, there's still no course workers here. So we reported in and they said, not a problem, we got it covered. So finally, Ron and 2 students who came out of the building who were going home stopped, set up the water stop, got all the water out for all the runners going by, and ran the water stop. So, you know, what you run into is not always strange, unusual things. Sometimes it's just people not showing up. This is also the only event I've been to where somebody's HT drowned. I think Bob, who was with the race director, under a tent, as I understand it, got his HT so wet that he couldn't transmit. So he could hear, but he couldn't transmit. And this is another one that, you know, the typical call-in is who, where, what. This is one where we had somebody after the event, about a block away from the finish line, collapse and require an ambulance. So that was the same thing. I think actually Mayor came down to the finish line when everybody came down, spotted the person and reported it, but he was up at water stop 3, I think, or 4, I think it was. So saying where you are is what you need to be able to respond to these things. Okay, so in the middle of the summer, when it gets hot and miserable, is when they start having longer races. Again, this is Montgomery County Road Runners, Riley's Rumble Half Marathon. And this is their webpage, so you can go back and read it. But it basically says, this shouldn't be your first half marathon because it's hot, it's hilly, it's humid, it's buggy, you know, you name it, they got it. They even say if you're not used to running half marathons and you want a little challenge, but you want to be able to walk the next day, you should consider the 8K, which they also run. And this is a typical example of an out and back course. Pikes Peak was end to end. This starts and finishes at the same place up in Boyd's, Maryland, at the park. They take a loop, run out of here, down, up, down there, and then back here. Kind of the challenges on this. You can see a little bridge down here. Bridges mean you're crossing creeks. Creeks mean you're down the bottom. So this is a hilly course. This runs downhill to here, uphill, downhill. The high points are up here, up there, and right about there, which is between this last person and here. You also see on here we had started with 4 cyclists, mobile, bike riding, out, covering, trying to identify last riders, you know, injured runners, runners that didn't look like they were going to finish. So people always ask me, why Riley's Rumble? Who was Riley? As near as I can tell, that's Riley. This is Riley's Lock, which is where the C&O Canal runs over Seneca Creek down along the Potomac. And as I understand it, he didn't start the run, but when Montgomery County Road Runners started the run, it actually started and finished at Riley's Lock. And I don't know whether the runners got rowdy and had a rumble and caused problems, but they moved to Boyd, Maryland, which is about 10 miles away. But how do you get from Seneca to Boyd? Well, they're runners, so you just run up and you start a separate race up there. This is the start. You can see all the happy faces, nice, fresh-looking people. They don't look like that at the end. These are the timing mats. You see them here, and at the finish. All the runners usually have chips either in their shoes or on the bib itself. And if you don't run over this reads the chips as the runners go by. If you don't run over this, you're not going to get a time, both on the start and the finish. That's why, you know, they're pylons and they're funneling people into the mats. If you read the results of these things, you'll see the runners get 2 times. They get a gun time and a mat time. And the gun time is when the gun went off until you finished. The mat time is when you cross the mat until you cross the finish mat. This event runs about 1,500, 2,000 people. The MS walk is probably 300 to 500. Pikes Peak is probably about 1,500. You know, the parades have floats and trucks and things. This one is about 1,500 to 2,000. So if you're in the backpack here somewhere, it can be 5 minutes before you even get to the front. So that's why they run those separate times. Narrow country roads, this is kind of typical. Park along the side of the road. This one's not bad because there's a police car there. You get yelled at less when there's a police car there than when there's not. The corn is as high as an elephant's eye. This is a typical water table. They lay them all out, they hand them out, grab them, and when the runners leave, there are cups all over the place. It's a disaster. Then these guys go clean it up. It takes them 10 or 15 minutes, and you could never tell they were there. Okay, now a question. It's the middle of the summer. It's 100 degrees out. She's wearing gloves. Why is that?
Handing out popsicles?
Exactly. So they not only hand out water, but in this event, they hand out popsicles. So that's why you see people here, you know, with gloves on, handing things out. The park's half marathon. This is the next big event, which is also a half marathon, just like Riley's Rumble, kind of leading up to later marathons in the year. This is the course. This is one we had a lot of problems with last year. This one also, if you look at the picture, had a rainy day, which I think was part of our problem. We had, you know, this starts in about the same place that Pikes Peak starts, in that little dip, and then it runs downhill to get to Rock Creek Park. You know, if you had to find the lowest place in Montgomery County, this would be it, along Rock Creek Park. So it runs down there. We've got A1, which was John running some problems. Alex was down in the dip here. Bill was down in the dip. Mayor had problems down here. The other issue with this is we've got so many directors we have a shadow. They have one race director, they have 3 sector directors. Bob, who was the South Sector Director, set up in the intersection just south of where Bill was, and he never could hit the repeater at all. I ended up talking to him on the phone. Mayor was fine until he got down there and then couldn't read anything. Mostly what I got from him was text messages. So this is kind of what it looked like. They close a lot of the roads for certain hours based on when the runners in the 15-minute, and then they're kind of on their own. This, I think, is the finish line. That's kind of a typical water. They stack them up. People come by at medical. And I saved this for some spectacular picture, but I forgot what it was. So looking at some of this, A1 up here down to the MARC repeater. You look at, there's A1 at 344 feet, there's the MARC repeater. If you think there's, you know, it's up on a couple 100-foot building, you still got shooting through a lot of things here to get up there. And I think, John, didn't you end up going up to the top of the hill too?
Yeah.
So down here where the aid station actually is, you really can't reliably hit the repeater. Alex was kind of in a dip also, not as bad, but you know, there's a little dip there, there's Rock Creek, and the same thing, you wind up hitting a lot of these hills. Plus, it's Rock Creek Park. It's a park, it's got 60 to 80 foot trees all in here, all soaking wet because of the weather. So,
Enjoy.
yeah. I was at 8-4, mid-2. A lot of the times I could hear Alex on the input to the repeater better than I could hear the repeater. Same with Bill, who was in 6. This was probably one of the worst. It's only 1.75 miles to the MARC base station, but again, This is the aid station. That's the creek. You run right into a hill, even a couple hundred feet up, and you run into all the trees around here. And that's what it ended up as. I guess some of you are old enough to figure out what it is.
Cone of silence.
Yeah.
It's dead smart.
The cone of silence. Okay, we've already reported on this in the past. Bill and I went out in order to duplicate the conditions. We went out on a completely dry day in the middle of the winter with no leaves on the trees at all. You know, you do things when you get around to them. This is Bill with a mast and the antenna that he put up, one-man setup. This is usually the one I use. Got it extended here with 2 other masts, and through a lot of work with these 3 masts, we managed to communicate with Bill with 1 mast over here. We also managed to hit the repeater. We were looking at crossband repeaters in different configurations. I live about a mile that way, so I had a crossband repeater on my desk, and with an HT from here, I could go through that, hit the repeater reliably. Bill also used an HT to hit the crossband repeater in his car, and we tried a lot of other HT antennas and hooking HTs up to these other antennas. Pretty much all of them worked fine. So crossband repeaters in these conditions are good. Modest mast, you don't have to have a 50 or 100-foot mast. You just need to get up over the clutter. Taller operators, I'm pretty short. We have a lot of tall people, and maybe they don't need a mast. And higher power. So I'm still looking for a 25-watt HT that I can bust through the leaves with. Marine Corps Marathon, I have absolutely nothing to do with this. Fred has a separate presentation on this. I don't know if you want to say anything about this at this point.
Actually, the only thing I would say is that participating in all the other events that Paul talked about is a really great training experience to be ready for this. This is a much larger event. You know, marathon's 26 point whatever miles. So there's opportunity for a lot more things to go wrong. And it's actually consists of 3 race nets. They actually have to divide the whole thing up into 3 different race nets. And 1 battery pack will not last the whole day.
Yeah.
And what's additionally true is this is where you'll see a place where the cutoff time is enforced.
Yeah.
You get to a certain point in the day, you become a pedestrian if you're not back over the bridge, or you're not at the finish line.
Yeah. Yeah, because you know they're shutting down a good part of Washington there. And I know one thing we didn't put up, but recently came up. Last year, MS Bike was trying to set up a bike ride. Initially, they wanted to start down here, run over into DC and out into Maryland. And it turns out they couldn't get permits to do that because DC is very careful about what roads they close and when and how. And I think just last week they announced that the 2019 MS Bike Nation's Capital MS Bike Ride is going to start in Reston, Virginia, and run through Virginia. 3 courses, a 30, a 70, and a 100. So if you're interested in that, I was going to put that on the website, but I don't know that we're going to be providing any support for that since it's not in Maryland, it's down in Virginia. Okay, and the last one on our calendar is the Rockville 10K, 5K. Mayor coordinates this. It's up in, I don't know if that's the county, it's up in Rockville somewhere. I'm not a Rockville resident.
King Farm area.
King Farm. So it runs down up the hill here, down in a valley, and back up to here. We used to typically for this In the past, we've used the 146 repeater, which is a little far away. I think last year we used the 443.9, which is on top of the building over here. It seemed to work a lot better. Some of these areas, this is Big Hilltop, but there are a lot of buildings up here, so they had some problems with that. Some of these areas are pretty low down here. So most of the events, we use the MARC 146.955, the MS Walk, and this one we use the 443.9.
Yeah, that's a good review.
Okay, so I'm going to go around the room and see who's going to volunteer for which event.